Call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone, and to everyone watching on the internet. Welcome, and hope you enjoy the meeting tonight. Let's kick off this first meeting, which I think for many of us is our first Corporate Policy and Finance Committee. So I need a bit of guidance this evening, but thank you in advance for that. So my name is Richard Scott. I'm the incoming chair, so try to do the best job I can. So I'll just work through the agenda. Yeah. If I do that. Yeah. Apologies, possibly not an apology, but Councillor Wen is on her way, stuck in traffic, likely to be a few minutes late. She will join us as soon as we can. Are there any notes of apologies?
None received, Chair.
None received. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 2, declarations of interest. So council members are invited to make any declarations of disclosable pecuniary or personal interests that may have relations in items to this agenda. Would anyone like to declare anything for the record, please? Thank you. Okay, very good. Well, item number 3 is appointment of vice chairman to this committee. Would anyone like to nominate a candidate, please?
Nominating Councillor Chang.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Councillor John. Okay, well, I'm happy to second that if I may. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? No. Okay, I think we'll take a vote. So could I have, am I allowed to vote? Or yeah. Can I have a show of hands from the attending councillors, please? All those in favour? Okay, I think that's unanimous. So congratulations, Councillor John. Looking forward to working with you.
Yep. Looking forward to support you.
Very good. So I think that closes item 3.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Thank you. Next is item 4. So this is the chairman's report and urgent items. So as I understand, nothing's expected.
No, nothing
Under those two. Okay. If I may make a statement, I'd like to just set the tone here. I would just like to, Councillor Ellis, if I may, just provide my appreciation for the good stewardship provided by the previous council members of all parties. I think the public is able to see the accounts and the records of this council on the website, which I think is a great thing. I've read them through, and I'd just like to thank you and your departing colleagues for their service. And I think you've left the books and the council in good financial shape. So on behalf of my party, in a very bipartisan spirit, thank you. I would like that recorded. If I wish it.
That's not on.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 5 is any public questions in accordance with Standing Order 20. Have we received any?
None received, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Good. Okay, so the next one is item 6, which would like the members of the council to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 8th of March. I think a hard copy has been shared with the.
If I can ask you to sign these, so if you initial each page and sign the date there, we can finalise.
Are there any comments to these minutes or any corrections? I don't think any of us here were present during that time.
So can you sign them when you weren't present there?
Yes, as the new chair.
Well, I think what I'm signing myself up to, so I think it's a simple factual statement.
Well, you say Councillor Ellis.
No, I wasn't.
Just looking, yeah.
Okay, I'm prepared to sign this. Whatever evidence suggests that the council been well run. You want me to sign it, please? It's that's September 4th. Very much. Thank you. That concludes item 6. And item 7 is minutes for any other meetings referred to this committee. Received none.
So we've got the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee minutes as part of the pack. So if there's any queries or questions on those.
give everyone a few minutes to read those through if required.
My only question might be a very simple one to answer because home to this. So on page 6 at 2025, it says that the total funds available in the bank accounts plural as at the 31st of March was 87,000, just over 87.5. And I just wondered if that was represented in some of our accounts elsewhere that we can see. Because it seemed to me that our bank account sort of show quite a bit more than that. I just didn't know where that figure had come from. Maybe if you could just take me to a page.
So on page 35, you've got the balance sheet. There's a slight discrepancy there, but I can come back to you on that. But the 87,486 and the 300. So we've got the 87,787, and which the £300 difference is the petty cash that we keep.
Right. So 87, you're saying 787 back one. Yeah.
So we've got the 87,486 or 487, if you like, in the minutes.
Okay, and then
£300
the
difference.
£300 petty cash.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
Any remaining questions on the minutes of the previous accounts and sub-risk subcommittee? You're apparently there, allegedly. Okay, well, in the absence of any questions, I think
We just need to vote to accept them.
okay, so I'll call a vote. All those in favour of accepting the minutes of said meeting? Unanimous, thank you. Right, so moving on to possibly, hopefully the most interesting item on the agenda is section item 8, so the officers' reports. And would you like to lead us through these sections?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So item 8.1, this is just showing that the things to highlight on this is, so on page 11 and 12, we've got the resolution tracker, and just to note that all items on here have been marked as complete, so there's no outstanding. And then on pages 9 and 10, we've got the forward planner, and you may wish to note that at the next meeting in September, I think the main item will be when we start going through next financial year's budget. So the process starts in September. We see it at CPF in September, November and January, and then it's finally signed off at council in January. But happy to take any further questions.
In terms of just how the budget is compiled, so that's primarily by the officers based on, you've got operational activities that require funding, we've got existing sort of capital spending commitments with various projects and so on. Is that the sole source of the budget coming from the council officers? Is there an input from, say, the Community Services Committee as well?
I think it would be a bit of both, in that we'll have the input from CSC from the management plans that have been agreed and the budgets related to them, but from officers as well, we'll be taking an estimate on inflation for our contracts and salary pay awards and things like that, just to make sure that councillors agree with our estimates. Okay. So we normally take a consistent, prudent approach, but it's just to make sure that everyone's
okay. I guess an obvious question is about inflation, because we're living in a slightly different economic environment than we have been historically. What assumptions are you using regarding inflation, and do you get that? Is there a standard sort of local authority budgeting assumption that you're using?
So it's built into the individual contract. So if we're aware of a specific inflationary rate, we'll use that.
Yeah.
If there's a budget that tends to go up by inflation, but there's no contract related to it, we may put it up by the most recent CPI.
Okay.
But that's not a sort of a normal, but
Okay. And do you state those assumptions in the budget documents?
yes.
Okay.
That's the issue.
Yeah, Chair, just to add one thing to Dan's answer there, just to take a step back, you might hear us refer to the September budget report as the first look. So basically our job as officers in September is to bring to CPF and say, in order for the council to continue to deliver to the same volume and quality that it currently is, this is the finance, this is the budget that we need, and these are the pressures that are within that.
Okay.
So the first look's the key thing, and our first look will always present based on the current volume and quality.
Essentially, it's a steady state budget. We're saying this is, we're going to keep the activity and the service levels of the council consistent with this. And on that basis, on a like-for-like delivery basis, factoring in inflation and contract provisions and so on, this is where we think we'll turn out. Okay.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions from the councillors on this item, please?
I guess one of the interesting things to come as part of that, I expect it will in September, is where the risk points are around the items in there. So, I mean, inflation's obviously one of them, but and how some of those might move over the next, we don't have significant borrowings, for example, but where those things might move.
Yeah, interest rate, inflation rate, are definitely moving, yeah.
I think one thing I'm just interested, and I'll come back to the terms of reference later on, but I think I'm just interested in I'm going to call you Alistair if I may, rather than Councillor Ray. I was finding it hard to keep up with the formalities, but that's just who I am. I think just understanding risks to the budget is really important. I'd like us to be a little bit glass half empty. No surprises as a mentality. Let's obviously try and manage the budget as tightly as we can once it's agreed. And I've made my comments about the previous leadership, but I think let's just make sure we go into this with our eyes open. And if you think there's a risk, I would like you to disclose that proactively within the budget. We'll have the discussion, we'll get the inputs, and we'll make a decision on that basis. Yeah, question. Okay, so turning to the forward planner and the resolution track. Do we need to approve anything or?
Yes, so it's the committee was asked to, and they read those out and then we take
Okay,
it
very
away.
good. So, thank you for holding my hand on this first meeting here. Okay, so we're asking all of us here to note and approve, firstly, the forward planner that's attached in Appendix A, which is pages 9 and 10. Please, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So if at the next meeting, or if in between now and the next meeting, something crops up that we think should go on the forward planner, is that something that can be amended, or is, once we've approved that, is it fixed? Is this a document now that we must work towards until the end date, which is the 6th of March?
No, this will be a standing item, so at every meeting, the forward plan will be on here, so we can.
That can be amended as, you know, if we I don't know, acquired a new asset, for example, and the figures change. Okay, cool. Sorry.
Very good. No, very good question. Very good answer. No, I concur with both. Thank you. And so item 1 is approving the forward planner, and item 2 is approving the resolution tracker in Appendix B. That is now complete. Okay, so I think we're asking the council committee to vote. So all those in favour of approving both items, please. Okay, thank you very much. The next item is reviewing and approving the terms of reference, which is on pages 13 to 12. A couple of comments and questions here, but I'd just like to invite comments and questions from the other councillors attending. Find on page 15. If I may make a couple of suggestions. So look, I think this is a very good list. If I may add a couple of other points, which I think we discussed in the briefing. First, just a question. I think a question of whether this terms of reference should cover essentially our register of assets and liabilities and obligations as well. Relating to the obligations and liabilities, a contract database. So we have contracts with third parties, we have service levels with citizens' rights, etc. Presumably at some point we'll have a signed agreement with Harpenden Town Football Club and the Harpenden Colts regarding the football project. So a couple of things related there, obviously like an asset register, which I think would sit within our terms of reference. Secondly would be our contract database. And with that, our register of key liabilities and obligations. And the third point I'd make is Treasury. So I think that Treasury sits within our terms of reference as well.
Would those references and the documents that you mentioned accompanying those then be accessible to the public? So I'm just wondering how much we want to disclose. I'm not saying we need to keep secrets or we want to keep secrets necessarily, but some companies are, quite rightly, they don't want to disclose how much they're charging us, for example, as opposed to how much they might be charging someone else or vice versa. And I do wonder if one necessarily leads to the next.
Yeah, so just two things to say on that, Chair. So first of all the things that you mentioned there, we have already, and they are part of the CPF, so it's just making it explicit in the terms of reference. Secondly, all those items are all publicly disclosable anyway, so there isn't the ability for the council to not disclose that. The slight nuance to that is, and that's because if we enter in a contract with any party, we have to make that available. We tend to make that available at the point of the decision being taken, so it's in the public domain in a report. Where we do have to be careful, and there's a slight nuance to it, is that if there were a number of organisations that were, say, bidding for a tender, we do have to treat those that aren't successful with sensitivity, but we do have to disclose the organisation that we've agreed to go with and the value of that contract.
And presumably there's elements of confidentiality around continuing things as well. So you're contracting for one piece and you're going to contract for another similar piece of work, you're not necessarily going to give everybody something to reference. Then next set of bids off.
Although payments over £500 are published on our website, so you could engineer a.
So more the terms of
what you do. So I think these are great questions, but is it necessarily true that the terms of reference of this committee equate to documents being published in the public domain? I don't think one necessarily triggers the other. I think there are items within our terms of reference where it may be appropriate for certain documents to be held within the council and not published for commercial confidentiality reasons, for example. Is that a fair statement?
I think the best way of describing it, Chair, is all these documents here and everything in your terms of reference, at some point throughout the year, there'll be items that come forward on it.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time, they will be items that are in the public domain. So these documents will naturally be in. The only distinction I would make to Councillor Ray's comment is that at the point of developing tenders and the terms of reference, they may not be in the public domain at that point.
Yeah.
The point that the council takes a decision, that resolution of who we've gone with and the value of it comes into the public domain at that point.
Just any sensitivity, because when you mentioned that 99% is publicly available anyway, but if that 1% we think is sensitive, I think we can always fall to exam that as to be disclosed if it's really necessary in the future. So should be fine.
Okay. Any other comments or questions from the councillors, please? Okay. So I think my proposal, and please advise if we need to vote on this, it's a very good terms of reference. I would just like to add the following points to include the asset register, our contract liability, our contract database, where this, whichever way you think appropriate. I think we just need a register of our liabilities and obligations in the same way that we'd mirror the asset register. And I think our terms of reference would also include Treasury. So if we can, so when we vote, if we say the committee's asked to note the terms of reference and approve it along with the suggested alterations. Okay. So before I move to that motion, any final comments, questions? Okay. So we're asking you to approve the terms of reference defined on page 15 with the addition of the following items. We would include asset register, contract database, also including liabilities and obligations, and we'll also note that Treasury would be included within the terms of reference of this committee. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. That was item 8.2. So move on to item 8.3, which is the provisional outturn for last financial year's budget. Ben, did you want to walk us through that, please?
Yeah, of course, yeah, thank you. So I'll go through this in a bit more detail than I normally would, just to try and set the scene a bit more. So please bear with me. I've got to make sure I've made myself some notes, so I try to make sure I cover everything. So the report presents the provisional outturn for the last financial year. It's unlikely to occur, but the reason it's called the provisional outturn is because there may be changes post-audit. There will be no further changes to the figures that you see here unless we're instructed by them. If I can ask you to go to page 22 in your pack. So this is the detail information. So what I try to do is tell the story of how we go from the original budget to the revised budget, first of all. So the original budget was set by council in January. Then the revised budget is the original budget plus any earmarked or capital reserves that have been released to give us the picture of the revised. All of those changes you can see on page 21 in your pack that are detailed out, and so description of the projects when they were released and the amount. From there, the revised budget is then compared against the actual outturn, i.e. what was spent or income received in the year. Those variances are shown within the pack, so a brief description on page 19. And if it's all right, just with the headings on page 22, if I can just give you a brief description of all of those. So I'm aware there's a few of them. So the staff costs is the salaries plus the on costs for pension and NI. The grounds maintenance contract, this is the agreement we have with John O'Connor through St Albans District Council to carry out the grounds maintenance work across all our open spaces. This agreement is due to finish in March next year, and we're currently in the process of bringing that service back in-house, just so you're aware of that. The management plan is all of the budgets that fund the management plans for our open spaces, so Lidecker, Commons, all the recreational areas, all of our open spaces. So the tree management, hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. We've got just over 31,000 trees that we look after with that. So next one, the other contracts. So that's things like our insurance cover, IT contract, cleaning contract, car park management. Then we've got the town centre management, which covers mainly the Christmas light displays and the floral display contract. Repairs and maintenance, hopefully that's self-explanatory. That's the planned and responsive maintenance for all our buildings. Business rates and utilities, just to make you aware on that, with our utilities, we've been protected by a long-term agreement with the utility provider, but that's coming to an end again sort of April next year. So we've been okay at the minute, but I'm expecting that's going to be one of the risks that we discuss come September, with the utilities going up and just how much that's going to impact next year's budget. So the service level agreements and grants is the agreements that we've got with the allotment societies, citizens advice, and the various partnership agreements we've got with people like the Public Lions, Round Table, and Rotary. We've got events that covers off all of our events, but obviously we've got the main one of the Summer Carnival at the weekend and Christmas Carnival later on this year. Town mayor members and civic expenses. This covers the cost of the elections and all of the councillor allowances. Other expenses is pretty much everything else, but that's the main things in there are the production of the Forum magazine that you've hopefully all received, any legal and professional fees, any vehicle costs, things like that. So anything that's not covered in any of the other headings. The business plan initiatives is similar to the management plan, but it's to bring the budget's used for bringing forward any business plan initiatives rather than something that's linked to the management plan. And the use of earmarks and capital reserves, I've covered that earlier. Onto the income. So commercial income, we've got park hall rental income, Lardecca car park income, the licence with the Gold Club on Harpen Common, ice cream concession, they're the main ones. The general income, the main item on there is now our investment interest income, but also includes smaller bits like the Harpen and Bloom sponsorship and things like that. Recharges is any service that we might recharge to an external provider. For example, if there's an event happening on our land, we might provide skips and then we'll pay for those skips and then recharge the costs. And the last one is the additional additions to the capital reserves, which is linked to the artificial grass pitch and the partnership agreement that we've got with Harpen Colts. Apologies for that, I'll pause my breath. So the total variance that we've got for last financial year is 610,000. Of that, 530 relates to earmarked and capital reserves that is purely a timing issue. So that leaves us with a kind of true variance, if you like, of 80,000. And of that, 63 has been put into earmarked reserves, with the remaining 17 put into top up our general reserve. Bombarded you with enough information, so I'll
Can
stop
you
there.
just pause there, because
Yeah.
so
Sorry.
I've got the 610, that's the net expenditure. I've found that figure.
So that's the variance.
That's the variance, yeah. And then you mentioned other figures after that.
So if you go to page 19,
Yeah,
so you've got your 610. The
Yes.
530 at the top relates to capital projects and earmark projects.
yes,
So it's purely a timing issue that the work's going to be completed in future years. So it's projects where the money's being allocated and released. And so we know we're going to be spending that money. It's purely
Yeah.
a timing issue.
yeah,
Everything else is all the in-year variances that have been summarised. So that's the remaining 80,000. So, for example, where we've got I'll put the general income, that's 32,000, and giving you a bit of narrative on that, the reason why. You can then, so we've got the 32,000 there,
okay, got it,
and then
yeah,
on your page 22, if you go towards the you've got income, commercial income, general income, and then go all the way across to the right, and then you can see that 32,418. So what that table on page 19 is doing is trying to summarise all of those variances and just give you a bit of narrative about why they've occurred in the year.
just not seeing 32 anywhere on page 22.
It is in the
Oh,
last.
that one, that's the general income, yeah. Okay, thank you.
So elaborating all the descriptions. What is the management plan again? Because I was dropping down and this thing.
So that's the plan that we have for all of our open spaces. So there's individual plans for each individual site. So there is it how much money we're going to be spending over the next 4 years.
But that area,
That site. So
different area.
yeah, so Rothampton have its own one, the Common have its own one, Batford, etc.
So I guess the revenue for those that is either incomplete or something like that. Okay.
I just noticed on page 19, and there's some favourable variances which are counterintuitively printed in red, but I'm not asking you to change that. There's a number of items where you've there's money unspent and you put it into the earmarked reserve. So basically, you're saying that's essentially still a potential liability, but you've sort of got the rainy day fund money sort of put aside and it's still available for us to spend in a future time period.
So the rainy day fund, if you like,
Or
is
the pre-rainy day.
so the general fund is, if you like, the rainy day fund for anything that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
With any funds that have been put to the earmarked reserve have to be for a specific project.
Specific purpose, the link to those specific spend items.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, for example, where we've had an in-year saving last year on the tree management, we know with our stock of trees and how much work that we've got coming up, that needs to be put into earmarked reserves to cover any future liabilities on any tree work we may have.
Okay.
And are these sort of typical sort of deferments of the spend into future years? Do you see a similar pattern of that over previous years? Anything unusual there?
It's all it varies year on year, but there's nothing surprising as we've gone through the budgetary control throughout the year. It's been things that have been planned to
I
spend.
guess you read a lot of variances.
No, that's fine.
But I think this question is more on any material like surprise.
That's not been reported previously.
Yeah.
That we were kind of aware of. So with the investment income, say, we were aware that the interest rates were changing and we were getting more for our investment. So it was making the CPF committee aware that we knew that favourable variance was coming.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's fine. I think just generally, if there's any bad news, I'm not saying there is any bad news. I'd do it early, upfront, so we've got time to consider the options. As I said before, I think the council seems to be in good shape financially. Like to keep that, so if and when something negative happens, we're in a position to stay in control and not have to impact the local community because we've got to slash and burn spending because we just missed something. And I'm not saying that we have, but when something unfavourable happens, just get it on the table as quickly as possible. Okay. Are there
Is
any?
it unusual to have big items of sort of capital expenditure coming out like I'll finish my sentence before I come to the figure. Much later than it was due. So the storage depot, for example, the date of that is 2020. And then we're paying it sort of 2 or 3 years later, and it's quite a lot of money, isn't it? So it looks a late payment. Is that
Yeah, so ordinarily we wouldn't expect chair councillors for there to be such a lag. But you can see there, there's a particular reason for that, and that's linked to storage depot. We have a signed lease with the district council However, there was a bit of land registry issues, which meant that actually the lease couldn't be implemented. So we had to put in a licence in place until the land registry updated their documents. Yeah, at the top of the park. So the land registry are currently running between 18 and 24 months delay in order to register things like the sort of assets we've got. So there's a very specific reason for that. So as soon as the lease comes into play, we have to pay the funding that's allocated to the storage depot. So that's a very specific example. And it's probably worth, Chair, just to for me just to explain the way that reserves, the process for reserves, the earmark reserves and the capital reserves, because there are some nuances around language. And released, the word released is a governance process. So there's three stages to earmarked and capital reserves. So if I take let's take a fairly small one like the website upgrade. So at a point in time, this committee agreed that it knew it was going to have to do a website upgrade at some point down the line. So it allocated some money in the earmarked reserves to fund that initiative down the line. So it was an allocation. The council can allocate and unallocate as it wants to and as often it wishes to. There's no commitment to anybody at that stage. Once something's allocated, the next stage is the authorisation. So the authorisation in this case would be that we bring a report to CPF saying, here are the different website providers, here's our preferred way forward. We would like you to approve that we go with X contractor, and we would like you to note that this is going to cost X amount. So at that point, that £7,000 was authorised to spend. So we as officers can then go and spend that money with that contractor. The third bit, which is the released bit, that's the kind of the internal governance. Normally, we would ask council and committee to do the authorisation and release at the same time. But the release means we're able, from an accounting point of view, to move it from the reserve pot to support balance the general budget, basically. So once there's authorisation to spend, the release bit can't change that. The release bit is a governance, basically taking it from, if you imagine a normal personal savings account, you can't pay your bills directly from that, but you can move money from that to your current account. So that's a similar process in terms of releasing. So release is a governance process. Authority to spend is the bit that is really important. The allocation is the bit at the start that can be undone at any time.
And just out of interest, is it actually separate accounts you're moving it from, or is it just short allocations within a pot of money and an internal accounting for that pot of money?
Yeah, just the allocation. We've got various investments that we've got, and so one of the things that we have got is a 32-day call account. So when I'm managing the cash flow, it's trying to. So we've got fixed investments for 6 months in some cases, but then try to keep as much as I can in the 32-day call without sending us overdrawn and incurring charges. So it's just that balance for managing the cash flow.
And then just to add, Chair, so it is very much that is a governance process, if you like. And just to pick something up on you said, Chair, local government finance, the way we have to do accounting is a bit bizarre. And from those of you in the commercial world, we'll look at some things and go, why on earth have we got the numbers that are favourable in red, for example? That's just the way that local government finance works. So we don't choose to do it that way, but we have to present it in that way. So you will see lots of quirks like that.
It's definitely a joke as to why the good numbers are red.
Yeah, I think I'm not used to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is there a term for paid? So I've got 3 stages, but no one's actually being paid yet.
Yeah, well, so a paid is a different process. So that comes in the budgetary control. Have we got?
Okay.
Let's have a look. So actually, under the next item, we will be able to show you.
So we might
where the
not
page
actually have
shows.
paid for this storage depot yet.
No.
No, okay, right. Jumping the gun, sorry. 3 stages might be enough.
Just on things like that, do we have policies on payments, for example, for local small business, local businesses, etc., as to what payment terms are? And yeah, there's quite a lot going around now around what big organisations, context is a big organisation, should be treating smaller contractors, etc. Particularly in tough times like it is now.
Yeah.
Be a more social responsible council to pay that rate.
That is the principle that I always use. So the terms might be 30 days, but as soon as the work's been completed and we've got the invoice and everything's been approved, it's time we pay it as quick as we can, don't hold on to anything and say, all right, we've got everything, but we don't have to pay this until next month. As soon as we've got everything we need, the invoices are paid.
Very good. Good discussion. Thank you for all the questions and the answers. So let me just call it, any final questions on item 8.3, please? I think we're being asked to note the report. Do we need to vote on the note?
Yeah.
Okay, so we asked to note the report. So all of those in favour of noting the reports, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to item 8.4, and here we're being asked to note the report and recommend to council for approval A, the level of reserves, and B, the statement of accounts. These are contained in pages 23 onwards. Did you want to just make any sort of opening or covering sort of comments about the documents here?
Yeah, of course, yeah, thank you. So I'm hoping from the main message from the previous report, as we've said, is that we are in a healthy financial position, with last financial year 17,000 being added to the overall general reserve. So that means that with the balance now, we've got just over 5 months of our net revenue expenditure. The guidelines say we should be between 3 and 6 months we should have between 3 and 6 of our net revenue expenditure. So we're in a good position with that. Although, just to point out as well, as I said earlier, just to reiterate that all of the items that have been added to the earmark reserves are all for specific projects. So there's no other unallocated funds, if you like, within the earmarked reserves. If I can draw your attention to the income expenditure on page 33, just to say, again, it's the same as the budgetary control that we went through earlier. It's exactly the same numbers, but just shown in a slightly different format, just to confuse everyone a bit more. All of those. So, and just to quickly say on the balance sheet on page 35, so all our main assets are noted on there in the notes. As a general principle, we have very low level of debt just because of the services we provide. We normally receive money for the services that we provide in advance rather than arrears. So the levels of debt are very low. In the balance sheet as at year end, the main items, it's the timing issues for receiving money back from HMRC or the Q4 car park income from Lydecker Car Park. Stop there. So I'm aware there's lots of numbers and lots of information.
Okay, any questions from the councillors present on the accounts?
Easier to understand the balance sheet than it is the P&L.
I had one question actually. So if I look at the balance sheet, page 35, by far the largest item is short-term investment. It's a reasonably healthy £2.56 million. It's the only item, or one of the few items, that doesn't come with an accompanying note to the financial statement. So I have asked you separately for an explanation of where is all this money, and you've provided me a perfectly plausible sort of summary of different bank accounts and some accompanying policy statements, which I thought were fine. So my proposal would be that we add a in a similar fashion to the other notes within the accounts, which are again, seem pretty good. I'd like, again, just given the quantum, £2.6 million is the largest item on the balance sheet. I would like to see an equivalent note with equivalent detail, just setting out the different accounts, where the money is, and any relevant notes to the accounts. I'd like to see that in the next couple of weeks. Now, also, if everyone's in agreement when we vote, I can make those changes. So when you see the statement of accounts again at council, you'll see that note added in. Good, yes. So for the record, I like those reissued in this year's accounts, not waiting another year. So I'd like those to see that note presented into the document that's presented to full council. Okay. Are there any other questions, comments from the floor, please? Okay, so we're just being asked now to vote on the accounts for year ending 23. All of those in favour of approving the accounts, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Good progress. Right, would you like to take us to item 8.5, please? Sure, thank you. So I'm really pleased to say that we've received substantial assurance from our internal auditors, which is the highest level of insurance that you can receive. Hopefully this gives councillors a reassurance that the numbers that you've seen in the previous two reports, the numbers that have been quoted, are correct, as we received no recommendations following the review by the internal auditors. To take any questions? For clarity, this is the internal audit report, which is provided by a body which is essentially like a shared service across Hertfordshire County. So this service is available to all sort of districts and parish town councils in. Okay, and this is not the external audits. We have an external audit carried out. And how frequent is the external audit carried out? It's annually. So once everything is agreed at council in June, there's a specific form that's signed by myself, the clerk, and the mayor. That's then sent off to our external auditors along with lots of supporting documentation that they require, and then they base their audit on that. We normally receive that, so it's submitted pretty much straight after the meeting, and then we normally get the response back from them in November. So hopefully at the November meeting, you'll see that we've got the bill of health from the external auditors as well.
We shop around for the best company to provide that at the best price. We don't just sort of go with whatever we did last year. Or do we have to go with whoever Bloggins in Canary Wharf?
With the external auditors, we have to use I forget the name of the authority that sets it, but there's basically for all town and parish councils locally, everyone uses that auditor, external auditor. So there's exercise that happened, tender exercise, and it's the same auditor. So the contract was extended for another couple of years. So it finishes this year, I believe, and it's been extended for another 3 with the existing external auditors.
So it's like a global tendering and then everyone follows.
Yeah, we have to. It's a national requirement. We have to be part of that.
Mm.
Internal audit chair, that's decided locally. We choose our internal auditors. So periodically, when the contract runs out, we will then go out to the market, so to speak, and get some comparable quotes.
So when you say for the internal audit, so I was under the impression that the internal audit was provided by the shared service from Hertfordshire County Council.
Yes, Chair, but we instruct them, we contract them. Yeah. So we could go with anybody for our internal audit. They're the company that.
Okay. And how long is the remaining sort of contract that we have with Hertfordshire?
It's just been extended.
We'll clarify that.
It's not an urgent question. I'm just curious. That's non-urgent action. Okay. Are there any questions from the floor on the internal audit report, item 8.5?
What did you think what was good
I
about
think it's quite detailed. My slight wonder whether it actually was whether you needed to do that much with having external audits as well. It seemed like a lot of effort going into that, doubling up for what's a pretty well run organisation.
Yeah, I thought, I think it's really good that we got substantial assurance. I think that is a like recognition.
I guess what did Reagan and Gorbachev talk about arms control? That we have trust, but it's verified. So, okay. But actually, please, Councillor Adams.
Years and substantial assurance.
Well, certainly every year, so at least 7, and then probably beyond that as well. I can't just think about before my time. I can't think of a time in the previous probably 8 years before that where it wasn't the highest level.
Any remaining questions on 8.5, the internal audit report? Okay, so I think we're going to ask to vote to note or note the audit report. So all of those in favour of noting the internal audit report, please raise your hand. Thank you. And just on a personal basis, could you just convey my thanks to the team, everyone from the council officers who participated in supporting the report. Please say thank you and well done. To know it's important part of the financial year. So thank you very much. Very good. Okay, item 8.6. So this is a report from the Citizens Advice, which is included on page 55 onwards, which I have to say I found very interesting reading personally. You want to just summarize the council speak?
Thanks, Chair. So as stated in the report, the Citizens Advice Bureau receives 5,000 a year from us. That helps run the services within Harpenden, and the service level agreement is attached for you to have a look at. You may wish to note on page 60, they're the figures that I always tend to go towards. So last year, if we see that they've helped 373 clients with over 1,500 issues. So it's a substantial amount of work that they're doing for us, but have to take any questions.
But one question I had was whether there'd been any conversations with Citizens Advice as to what, as times become more difficult, as to whether they were expecting requirements on their services to become more difficult as well, whether they were potentially prepared for what that might mean.
They've not flagged anything to me yet, but obviously when the agreement comes up for review fairly soon, it's that's the conversation that we can have then. So
Yeah, just to add to that. So if you had the last, say, probably 8 or 9 updates, you might see a change, or you would see a change in the type of issues. So historically, so there's many more people presenting to the Citizens Advice now with the kind of the cost of living type challenges. So we've seen a change in trends in that sense. They also report an increase in demand on their services, which again, perhaps what might be useful, Chair, actually, is to circulate after this meeting some of the previous updates, so you might be able to pick out some of those changes. So they'll report that demand is increasing on their services. They are largely volunteer run and do rely on external grants and service level agreements. So I'm sure if they were here now, they would say that in order to meet that demand, existing and growing, they need more funding. That's an important point in the context that the Town Council agreement ends at the end of March next year. So at some point, there'll be the consideration that the council needs to give us to whether it wants to extend it. It's probably just worth saying one of the things that the council, all councils have always kind of toyed with, is this idea that the money that we provide doesn't only go to helping people from Harpenden. So you'll see that the percentage of people that access the support is quite a low percentage from Harpenden itself. historically the council has not viewed that as a particular issue or something that's prevented them from wanting to fund the support. But it's something that I just make the point and something will come up.
And I suppose all I was thinking was there's likely that there will be more, I can see more pressure coming from this, and to the extent that when that debate comes in March, everybody's prepared and understands all of the deep dive of issues that there are. It's probably a good thing rather than trying to have to make a snap decision on what's probably quite an emotive and difficult subject for people.
Where do they access the clients? Is it at the library or is it just phone calls or?
So they're at the Salvation Army at the moment. Things have changed dramatically in recent years. When we first set up the first cycle of this agreement, they were operating 2 mornings a week in Harpenden. COVID changed lots of things. They went to a remote service, and there was, it's fair to say there was quite a lag between the end of COVID and the return to face-to-face. We've only got 1 day a week now.
Do you know that they are also 3 afternoons a month at the food bank in Crabtree as well? Citizens advice that. Yeah,
absolutely, and I think that's a good example, Chair and councillors, that showcases the funding point, because as I understand it, funding was available from the food bank, and so they then turned their attention to that area because there was the funding. That's just the model they have to operate.
I don't know. I can find out then.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes they have to operate in a way that if somebody or an organisation has funding to do a certain thing, they pivot and put their attention towards that because they have to go where the funding is.
I think what it's fair to say is that people turn up at the food bank with issues and debt. And so it's a client might not naturally go to the citizens advice, but they'll go to the food bank because they need food. And at that point, citizens advice can intervene and say,
well, yeah, the way I'm a team leader at the food bank, so I work at 3 of them across St Albans and Harpenden, and the system is that they get emergency food for 3 to 5 days, however many people in the household. When someone starts to come on a regular basis, we try and encourage them to see the citizens advice just to check they're not due something that they're not getting, and actually is there another way we can help them solve their problems and get them back on their feet to reduce the reliance. We're happy for them to come as often as they need, but it's kind of a flag to make sure, and then we often refer them and encourage them to have those conversations, or to the Harpenden Trust as well.
Just to add, Chair, there are citizens advice obviously do a great job, but we are fortunate in that we do have some really good other advice services as well. So Harpenden Money Advice Service, completely separate to citizens advice, and receive no funding from us other than working in partnership. They are another organisation that offer a huge amount of financial advice to a range of different people, and also the food bank, the King's Pantry Food Bank, that the town council has been heavily involved in for a long time, particularly during COVID. Again, has a similar referral mechanism. So citizens advice are kind of one arm of the support offer that's out there in the town. The Harpenden Trust is another great example.
So the Harpenden Money Service, that's the one at the top, isn't it? Is it St All Saints?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's that one. Okay. I might be wrong, I don't think I am, but there's often a correlation, I think, with monetary issues, cost of living crisis obviously being one example of that, but if there's stress at home, people have different issues, and obviously the legal issues become more about family related problems as well as just debt and other financial advice.
Just one final thing on that, Chair, just to give an example of how the town council kind of operates in that space. What we try to do, because there are so many organisations that are doing these great things, we try to be a facilitator. So 2 really good examples, one during COVID where we set up Harpenden Cares, where we pulled all these different agencies together and made sure that the resources we've got weren't duplicating, and we were identifying and utilising gaps. And then more recently with the support to Ukrainian guests, again, we convened a steering group, facilitated all these different partners to work with these individuals. So just for a slight tangent, but the town council's role is to kind of place itself as historically has been a facilitator.
I was going to ask, thank you for that statement. I was going to ask a similar question, and I'm very pleased, and I would definitely applaud that sort of coordinating, convening role to bring all these parties together. I would certainly do everything I can to encourage that. And if there's anything else that the officers can see in terms of opportunities to go further and faster, and if you need the support of the council to do that, then I would be very keen to see those suggestions. Okay, thank you. And I mean, for me, it's a great page, but obviously behind the stats are sort of human stories, and it does sort of humble you a little bit when you realise, you're living your life, and for many people, life is a struggle, isn't it? And there are clearly a number of people in our community who are looking for help, and I'm very pleased that we're able to, in a maybe a small and humble way, able to do some things to make a difference. So I'm very pleased to see this long may it continue. Okay. Thank you. Okay, any final comments, questions, observations about the Citizens Advice Report, please? Okay, so I think a very simple motion would just move to note the reports. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. So, and we can just close the meeting. Very good. By the time you make it. Okay, right, so prepared to, unless there's any final items from the floor? Anything else to raise? Very good. Okay, so I declare this meeting finished. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time. And thank you for the document.